The following is an interview with a Mrs. Peterman, Peterman, in the Ardmore area, and the first name is not given in the tape from which it's copied.
I'm going to interview Mrs. Peterman, who lives at 302 G Northeast. Mrs. Peterman, would you tell us about Ardmore when you came here? What year was that?
1898.
Would you tell us about Ardmore?
All I know about Ardmore was a little town. No paint, of course, no sign. In the middle of Main Street was a well of water. And the farmers from all around, for hundreds of miles, would come here to Ardmore to do their trading. And, of course, water their animals right there on Main Street. Well, when it rained, Main Street was nothing but a bog. And the cars and the wagons would all bog up. Well, but one of the highlights of this part was that the cotton crops. They raised lots of cotton here. And you could see them come in with those wagons boarded up on the way high up and just loaded with cotton. I thought that was a pretty sight. Well, they take the cotton then to these different gins and bales. That's about all I know. I didn't pay attention to it, and I know they had a little old schoolhouse up here. They call it the Dunlap School. And it was really a Rudersill, if you know how to spell it. I don't know. Rudersill's Business College. And
how many gins did Ardmore have?
How many what?
Gins.
3. One over in this part and 2 of them the other different parts. They had 3 gins. See, they come in from all directions. But the cotton was brought here to be ginned from all around. That's all I know. I didn't pay attention to what was going on because I didn't want to stay here. I wasn't going to stay here.
Would you tell us about the kind of weather they had here? You said mentioned it was dusty.
Dusty? They had no trees, It's the trees and the grass and things now that has civilized it, as I call it. But at that time, there was nothing, and the wind, the dust was something terrible. And as I say, there was, when they had that, there was once a year, they'd give them a picnic out there, and they'd barbecue some animal of some kind and furnish bread and pickles and things like that, and the farmers would come, as I say, from hundreds of miles around to celebrate and get that little food. And then they'd dance. And the cowboys, they'd dance with an old red bandana around the neck and spurs on their boots. And they just dance, and I tell you, they would dance. I didn't pay any attention to the part of the town. You get somebody that can tell you that, who the new mayor, who the first mayor was, and who the... I didn't, as I say, I didn't pay attention to it.
Would you tell us about the railroad station in Ardmore?
Well, the first station they had was where that water tank is now on the railroad track this way. One room. The boards was not. Of course, they couldn't whitewash, but they They haven't done anything yet, as far as I'm concerned. You better pet. One lady was asked by some little party that came from Michigan down here and says, what keeps this town up? Oh, she said, we live off of one another. And I think that was the truth. Said we live off of one another.
Would you tell us about Washington School about the founding? We don't know exactly the date. Would you tell us about who was the first principal and things like that?
No, I've been trying to think of that man's name, his wife. It seems to me I couldn't tell you the name, but his wife lost her mind, and he had to take her to Norman, and let's see, his name was I should think anybody'd lose their mind to live in this place. But it seems to me, now Kelly ought to be able to tell you that, who the first principal. But the school was, they called it the Dunlap School. But it was really a Rudersill. I don't know how you'd spell it, Rudersill. R-U-D, Rud, I-S-I-W-L, Rudersill. Business College. And I don't know much about the place because I wasn't interested and I didn't take him. But only that first appearance I was a little old country town. Dirt roads and everything else. There wasn't a sidewalk. They had the little store buildings were just straight up and down boards, you know. And sidewalks with boards. You'd step on one board and another one would fly up and hit you. And I thought it was awful place. Well, I don't know when Washington School, of course, that funny was where it is now. Located right where it is now.
When Washington School was founded, I believe you were the first president of the...
Mission. Oh, they had it Mother's Club then. But they
call it PTA.
They call it PTA. Yes, I was there. Professor Evans, Charles Evans, was our first superintendent up there. I know that. Mm-hmm. And I didn't want to, because I didn't have no children in school. I didn't know anybody. But they put me in as president, and I had to keep it for 4 years before I got out of it.
Well, what about free schools? Do you remember when they first came in?
Wasn't there always free schools?
Well, I just wondered if you remembered anything about before they were free schools.
No, I don't. Now, Callie could tell you because she, as I say, she was born and raised here. And I couldn't tell you because I wasn't interested. And as I say, they didn't have a church over here. They didn't have anything. Although this was considered the best part of Ardmore. When the railroad track went through here, this part of Ardmore was the best part of Ardmore. Mm-hmm. And later on, when we brought in all those oil fields and all, and the people that got rich people, they bought up that land, the third ward now, and that was the Indian burying ground. That's what that is over there. And I said, well, no, I wouldn't live over there. We were planning to buy I guess it's the Episcopalian church over there, near the Catholic church. We were planning to buy that ground there, but over here, now that house across there from where Miss Hamilton lives was a little 4-room house there, and it had a grass yard, and somebody had planted nice fruit trees there. And that was so tempting to me, I said, well, I'll go back up there. We went back to Marshall the second and third time before I decided to stay here. And I said, well, if you'll move over there where we have some green grass and some trees, I'll go back. We had built a house. Well, it's the same house across the street from the Christian church. It's now some office building. What is it? It used to be the Noble Foundation or something like that. We sold it to Dr. Shackelford. Do you remember him? He was the osteopathic doctor here, well known. We sold the place to him. From a house, we built that place. It's now that, I don't know what it is now. But back of us, they had no wagon yards, and all the farmers would come in with their wagons, and they'd put them in the back of our place there, and then Broadway, see how broad it is? And it wasn't paved, and believe me, I had dust. And I wouldn't live there. We went back to Texas. We moved back there some 2 or 3 times before I really settled here.
You said your husband was one of the first doctors here. Would you tell us all about that?
I don't know whether he was one of the first child. I couldn't tell you that. He was a homeopath. And you know, the homeopaths are not taught much of, so I feel pretty sure that they had other doctors here. I'm sure Dr. Booth I couldn't tell you, Charles, but I don't know whether it was Dr. Gardner and Dr. Booth were some of the first doctors they had here. But I don't know whether they were really the first or not. You better get somebody that can tell you more than I can.
Would you tell us about when Dr. Boyd came, how that came about?
Well, my husband died. It'll be 35 years ago. This coming Decoration Day. He died. He was ill and injured himself from the fall. Well, so I got Dr. Boyd here. I brought him right here in this house here and kept him here. And I phoned around to all the different patients. What sort of diseases did they have that had real troubles would go to the cities and have better treatments, you know, than they have here. So I couldn't tell you. Some of the patients, though, followed us up here from Texas to have doctors. Hey, dear. Hello.
What kind of a police force did they have here in Ardmore?
Well, I could hardly tell you that, honey, while my husband was chief police. But
Your husband was the sheriff?
yes, I can tell you lots of things that happened while he was sheriff.
Some of the things that happened, some real exciting experiences or something.
Well, now, honey, I'll tell you, I nearly always went with him when he went on a raid, you know, out in the oil field. And so I remember so well one afternoon that there's some whiskey peddlers out there. He said, "You want to go with me?" I said, "Why, of course." So we got in the car, and I won't tell you that before we had any pavement. And now, oh, you talk about, it's just like riding a bronc. To ride in that car, to stay in the car. We went out there, and so he went to a place where they said this whiskey was, you know, and he raided, and and the fellow run that had the load of whiskey, and he just strode the whiskey all along the highway, and so finally we got him stopped, and he had thrown, it was in sacks, gunny sacks, and he had thrown, I don't know how many sacks out, and he was going across a bridge across the creek, and he threw 3 or 4 sacks out there. Well, we got that, and finally we caught the fella, overtaken him and caught him, you know, and he said, "Well, what'd you do that for?" And Buck said, "Well, you knew it was against the law to handle this stuff, and we know the fellow well." And so he brought him on to town, and the whiskey, we picked up the whiskey while it wasn't broke all to pieces, and it was fun to me. I enjoyed it. And then I know so well one time they'd phoned us phone Buck to come out there, and he always would come by and ask me if I wanted to go with him. And of course I always wanted to go, and I went on with him, and let me see now, that time I believe that we got a carload. We'd gone in my car, and so he said, "Well, are you afraid to haul that to town?" I said, "No, I'm not afraid to haul it to town." And so he said to a taxi driver here that we knew real well, he said, "Now, you trail her in because she's never driven at night any, and she might get excited." So he started trailing me in. So I got in long before he got here. And he called up and he said, "Miss Garrett?" I said, "Yes." He said, you must have drove like the Dickens are coming in. Why, I said, I never. I just drove along an ordinary rate. I said, I didn't rush to get in or anything. He said, well, how long you been in? I said, long enough to go and eat my supper and come back up home. And he said, well, I tried to catch you. Well, I said, you didn't try very hard or you could have caught me. Because I said, I didn't run no race with nobody.
Would you name some of the famous outlaws that were around here then?
Well, let me see if I can think of any. Well, nearly all of our outlaws were from older states, you know, either Mississippi, Alabama, or Kansas, or somewhere up in there. And I just don't believe I can remember any of their names. But, Lord, we've had a many of them.
Was Ardmore one of the biggest towns around here? Is that why they all came here? Is that...
I know so well when Buck was sheriff, why, all those circus people, they wouldn't let no bunch like that follow them around because they told them, said, you'll sure get caught if you go there because Garrett won't let you do any rough work there. You need to try it. Said, because he don't allow no pickpockets or anything like that in Ardmore. So Buck always was watching out for that, you know. He loved to catch those pickpocket people.
I guess he was a pretty good sheriff then.
He was a pretty good sheriff. He's supposed to be the best sheriff.
He put in office. What year?
Couldn't tell, I believe. I think it was.
1910?
It was right after statehood.
What things do you remember about Ardmore before statehood? Did they have a police force around here then?
Yeah.
They did?
Uh-huh. He used to be chief police. He was chief police 7 years and a half.
Do you remember anything about the celebration of the statehood day? When it
No,
was
I don't,
so?
honey. I don't remember about that. But Lord, I said, I've gone with him so many times to the oil field and brought in. I said, I wished I had the money now that I'd hauled into Ardmore in my automobile and whiskey. I said, I'd be sitting on Easy Street. He said, well, aren't you afraid to bring that whiskey in the car? I said, no, I'm not afraid. He said, well, what if somebody had stopped him? I said, well, I'd just stop. That'd be all.
Could you tell me some of the exciting experiences that Mr. Garrett had while he was chief of police or sheriff?
Well, I can tell you one occasion while he was sheriff. On the road, the main highway going up to Genopry, they call it now. We called it Berwyn then. He and Bud Blue were after a couple of bandits, killed one of them, and one fella grabbed Buck by the finger, and he jarred him loose from him and kept him from biting his finger off. Yeah, they killed one of them, and the other one they put in jail.
Who were some of the men that worked with him?
Bud Blue and Jim Carter and let's see, Bud Blue and Jim Carter and Bill Ward and a fellow by the name of Pipe. And let me see if I know anything about them. And a fellow named Bill Powers. I believe that's all the boys that I know that ever worked for Buck. You hear men say, well, I worked for Mr. Garrett. Now, I said, that's one lie you could have kept from telling, because he never did work for Buck. I said, I know all the men that ever worked for Buck.
How long was he the sheriff?
12 years and a half.
When was he made the chief of police?
He was chief police, honey, before he was sheriff.
Do you remember what year that was?
No, I just couldn't call. That's an awful memory. What year it was, I've forgotten. And then so many things happened since then and now.
Would you tell me how the town looked?
Well, it just looked like a country town. The sidewalks were board, and the main street, there wasn't no pavement. It was just as muddy as it could be. Hog water on Main Street around this public well, and the fleas would eat you up if you go walk downtown.
Well, was Ardmore centered around what streets?
Caddo and Washington. And Main, Washington and Caddo was the main street, and then Caddo and Washington was the next main street. And we always called it Bloody Caddo.
Well, what type of buildings were built along these streets?
Well, usually just some box building thrown up. The footing of the hotel was the first brick building that was ever here.
What kind of business did they have?
Well, usually cafes and business stores and restaurants and things like that.
Was cattle real wild then?
Oh, it was awfully wild. Why, every once in a while, I know so well one afternoon, Buck had gone with Mr. Anderson to Pennsylvania to see after his boy got full and had killed a man up there. And Buck went with him up there, and I'd gone downtown that evening, and as I started to cross Caddo Street, they had a shooting scrape down Caddo, and one of Buck's policemen came up the street. I said, "What's the matter, Mr. Redmond?" "Oh," he said, "I'm cut and shot all to pieces." I said, "Oh, no, you're not." "Oh, yes, I am." He'd got shot in the thigh, and he was cut and shot all to pieces. And a bunch of boys that lived here, this was their original home, you know, was the Four-She boys. They had a scrape down there with the Fords, I think, and the Four-She's were having a shooting scrape, and this accidental shot Mr. Redmond, you know. And he was shot in the thigh, and when I asked him that, I couldn't help but laugh. I knew he wasn't hurt too bad, you know. Wasn't anything to be worried about because he wasn't shot in the abdomen or any part of his body where it would really be serious.
Did they have pretty good doctors that could take care of things like that?
Oh, yes, we had good doctors. Dr. Hardy was our main doctor. He and Dr. Henry up over the Ramsey Drug Company. There on the corner of Caddo and the Martin Drug Company now. That's where Mr. Ramsey and Mr. That's where Dr. Hardy and Mr. Ramsey, Dr. Henry had their hospital up over the Ramsey Drug Store. Main Street wells were dug wells.
And they were for the cattle, were they, or for everybody?
For the farmers who came to town to water their horses with, you know, their wagon, they'd drive the wagon and team just down there and draw water and fill up the water trough and let their horses drink.
What was the main thing that supported this town, that kept it going?
Cotton.
Everybody raised
Raised
cotton?
cotton.
Did you have any Indian trouble in
No.
the territory? The Indians were accepted then.
Yeah, they were all accepted. They were all educated, the Indians were. We didn't have as many ignorant Indians as we've got nowadays. They were all educated.
What about Negroes?
We didn't have but very few niggers then. But the niggers were peaceable, quiet people. They never bothered. One time, when Buck was sheriff, they had a little riot among the niggers, but he put stop to that. He just stopped it right now, and all the niggers thought they was going to go to Buck when they died.
Would you tell me what business the Fraley brothers were in?
Lumber business and contracting business.
Could you describe the celebration of Ardmore's birthday?
Well, honey, the best I could describe to you is just a lot of country people and town people gathered here, and they had a big dance platform out at Whittington Park, you know. And everybody would dance and have a good time.
Well, on July the 28th, I believe that's the day.
On the 28th of July.
Everybody from all over came.
Oh, everybody from miles and miles around.
How did they come?
By wagon team.
Well, could you tell me some things you remember that happened during the celebration?
I hardly ever went to anything like that because I didn't hear much about it.
What was the first newspaper here in Ardmore?
The Ardmore Democrat.
And that later became the Ardmorite?
No, the Ardmore, after the Democrat went out, why they come here then. Mr. Easley was the first. No, there's old Colonel Suggs was the first one, wasn't he? The Ardmore.
Would you tell me something about the kind of schools that Ardmore had?
Well, we had fairly good schools, what we call the King College, right down here on the corner where B.F. Goodrich is now. That was the old King College. That was one of the best schools in town, and then we had another private school over on First Avenue. Let me see, what was it they called? What was it they called that school over there? On the corner of First Avenue and A Street. Where Harvey Brothers are taking is now. It was a private school, I believe.
Did they have mostly private schools around here?
We didn't have any public schools then.
They came in later. Could you tell me anything about the mail, the way you received mail?
Well, the Santa Fe train. Our mail come on the Santa Fe train. Then we had hacks that run from here to Raylan, and he from out there brought the mail back and forth.
What were some of the outstanding things that people did in those days for entertainment?
Oh, they'd go to dances and have things like that, parties and things like that, you know. Mostly dancing, though.
Was it square dancing?
Square dancing and round dancing both.
Do you remember any exciting incidents that took place?
No. I don't remember any exciting.
Could you tell me something about the rodeos they had then?
Didn't have any.
They did.
Not then. Rodeos just come in a few years in Oklahoma.
Would you tell me about the time you went to pick your husband up to take him to dinner?
Yes, ma'am. The county attorney, Jimmy Mathis, killed us. Was up in his office. And I was sitting just north of the courthouse, right back of the, let's see, who is in there now? In the dry goods business. And they, you know, they got a drive-in back of the store there. I forgot who it was there. Huh? Tied the mare to a post there, and I run up to the courthouse, and just as I run in the county attorney's office, well, there lay a fellow we all called Wobbling Willie. Laying there, he was shot, you know. And so I lay there I sat down in a chair then, and the flies were bad. And I kept the flies out of his face. The poor thing died. I didn't want the flies to blow in, no way.
This concludes our... Yes.
You want to take it on television?
Yes.
You want to take it on television?
This is Marion Hanson. Woman.
Oh, I know what this is.